Welcome to the Faith Science Podcast. I'm your host, Jerry Swafford, and on this podcast, we explore the integration of science with faith. Today's guest is a native of Nigeria. He is an educator, mathematics curriculum writer, and physical and medical physicist. He is an adjunct on the staff of LeTourneau University in Longview, Texas. He is also the co-founder of the Learning Institute for Excellence and is working on a STEM Excellence Center, which would be a biblically based alternative to after-school programs such as Kumon, Mathnasium, or the Sylvan Learning Center. He is married to Stephanie and has 7 children. Our guest today is Amos Tarfa. Amos, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I gave that long blurb, but what am I missing? What is there that if you were talking to somebody, introducing yourself, what would you say? What am I missing?
Well, by God's grace, I've also written a few books, starting from one I wrote when I was actually like 17, 18, called Achieving Excellence as a Young Person.
Okay.
The reason why I wrote the book was because I was trying to help young people in Nigeria to learn how to study. There was a big problem with exam malpractice happening in Nigeria at the time, where people want to steal the exams before the day of the exam. People were not studying as they should. And so I wrote a book, and I used to go around Abuja, Nigeria, to talk about education excellence and also character. And I would seek out opportunities to talk about faith. So that was how the U.S. Embassy heard about me. And then I got a chance to come to America to get my bachelor's degree.
Oh, okay. So you're originally in Nigeria. You wrote that book while in Nigeria.
Yes, right after high school.
Okay. So yeah, we probably need to talk after the show also about book writing, because I'm working on a book too. So
Yeah.
okay, so you come to America, and what do you study for your bachelor's degree?
So I studied chemistry, pre-med. I had read a book by Dr. Ben Carson, and I wanted to be like him, a pediatrician.
Okay.
I wanted to inspire young people. That was really my vision. And that was what I used to do across Abuja. I was the student body president, or they call it head boy, or senior prefect in boarding school in Lagos, Nigeria. So when I graduated and wrote my book, I always had this passion to inspire young people. So when I came to America, the goal was become a doctor by day, and then you can inspire them later in the day. That was sort of the idea that I was operating under. But when I talked with my friends in America at church, they began to tell me that being a doctor takes a lot of time, and you're not going to be able to do some of those things you want to do. And I don't just want 15 minutes with a young person and say goodbye. I want to be able to inspire the young people as a group in larger chunks of time. And that's why that's part of why I pivoted to teaching. But there's actually a piece of apologetics that caused that. And that happened on April 1st, 2009, which I can share later on. Okay. So I put the book side behind us. There are 4 other books, and we can talk about that later, but they're all centered around education, apologetics, faith, and then the last one was on mathematics, tools for mastering mathematics.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you're married to Stephanie. You've been married for about how long?
We got married in October of 2011, so 13 years this year.
Okay. So been married 13 years, and you said 7 children, right?
Yes, 7 children, from 11 down to 1.
11 down to 1. So is that it, or as many as God will allow? What is the...
The last one's name is Malachi, so that's significant. Okay. He's the last of the prophets.
Last of the prophets. So that's it, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, so I like in this section, let's just go through your story then. You said you got these books. You said there's something that happened in April of the past. But if I say, okay, Amos is currently, by the way, I don't think we even said this, but you are currently living in Texas now.
That's correct.
And I did say that you were an adjunct on the staff of the LeTourneau University. Are you living in Longview now?
I live about an hour from Longview in a city called Tyler, Texas.
Tyler, Texas. Okay, so you're in Tyler, Texas. You were originally in Nigeria.
Yep.
Okay, how does one get from Nigeria to Tyler, Texas? What is the story there?
So I graduated in 2005 from high school. I thought I was just going to, go to college in Nigeria. That was sort of the plan initially. I was going to become a doctor and retire 40 years later. That was the basic story. Okay. However, when I graduated, in the high school years, I had a classmate that really encouraged us to get serious about our faith. I still remember to this day when he started challenging us about, look at the music you guys are listening to. You guys say you're Christians and you're listening to some of this stuff that says stuff that doesn't honor the Lord. And that struck a chord with me. And I remember, because it was very common for people to listen to whatever music, even if they profess to be believers. But what he said really got me thinking. And so there was this season where I, repented and just threw away all that stuff. I didn't want to have anything to do with music that was, glorifying things that they shouldn't glorify. This classmate of mine, his name is Bami Shai, lives in Canada now. But anyways, that series of events led to, after graduating in 2005, July, by December of 2005, I really was seeking to grow in my walk with the Lord. By January of 2006, my heart was just all about how can I serve the Lord while I'm waiting for my university to start. Nigeria's K-12 education system is very good for rigor, but when it comes to the university sector, there's only so many spots available. So a lot of students end up having to sit at home for a long time before going to college. And so while I was at home, I decided to write a book and start, talking to different schools. Heard about the U.S. Embassy, heard about it. They said, hey, would you consider going to school in America? I said, yes. Okay, so I ended up in America in Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin in Superior. Pre-med chemistry, again, still on track to become a doctor. That was 2007. 2009, I introduced myself to a professor of philosophy on campus because I heard about what he was teaching. And at that time, I knew about the law of non-contradiction, that a thing and its opposite cannot be true. So if his students are telling me that, hey, in philosophy, we learned about this theory or we learned about atheism or whatever, I thought, you know what, I should probably share with him my faith, that I am a Christian and I really do believe this. And so I met him at the coffee shop. He was just in the student sort of center. And I just went up to him and said, hi, my name is Amos. I heard about your class and I'm a Christian. And I, just wanted to share some of my, where I'm at. So he asked me some questions. We had a good conversation. And then he said, take my class, philosophy of science, and we'll talk more. And I said, sure. So I didn't have to take the class. It wasn't required for anything, but I took philosophy of science and my life has never been the same. The reason is because in that class, on April 1st of 2009, they invited an atheist to talk about the non-existence of God because of suffering, something to that effect. And I remember trying to gently give my response. The question, I tried to explain how can you talk about good and evil if there's no objective standard, and who gives us an objective standard? Those kinds of apologetics pieces. And then they took us to the faculty lounge afterwards. We had a good discussion, debate. And after that meeting, I decided I cannot become a doctor. And the reason at that time was because I said I would rather deal with the mind all day. I would rather deal with encouraging people and being a witness and being a teacher or professor or a Christian apologist than I would just being a medical doctor all day. So that was what changed my life story. So I graduated 2010. I taught for 2 years at a high school in Duluth, Minnesota. And then I got my master's in medical physics, worked as a medical physicist. I was running tutoring centers all along. But then in 2020 to 2021, I decided, why don't I get a PhD? So I start a STEM college. That was sort of my vision. Why don't I do that? A STEM college with a Christian, background. And I went for my PhD in chemistry. And it was during that time we found out we're going to have a baby. At that time, there was 6 kids. So I thought that we were going to have 6 kids at the time, and I had kind of calculated. And so when we had number 7 coming, we decided it's not a good idea to work as a physicist, get a PhD, and have a 7th baby. So I decided to pause the PhD. After that, I started a STEM school and eventually helped to start another one in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And then the opportunity for doing education full-time, I thought I could do that, but it was a little too early. I jumped too early, and I decided it was best to go back and do my medical physics full-time while education was sort of a side thing. And that's part of why we moved to Texas, was for my medical physics work to continue. That's a long story, but that's how we got here.
So I'm gonna go. I've got questions about the story. So I don't know this for sure, but they say that Nigerian parents, they want to see lawyer, they want to see doctor, they want to see specific. Is that correct? Was there any pushback when you wanted to make this pivot?
No, my parents are very loving and kind and willing to allow us explore whatever fields we want to go into. There's a joke that says you're either a lawyer, a doctor, or a failure in Nigeria, right? So
Okay,
that's
so
the
I did hear that right. Like that's
yes,
what people say. Okay.
yep. An engineer would be on there too.
Okay,
But
engineer is good.
so in Nigeria, before you graduate 12th grade, and we can definitely have a discussion about education and strategies, but in Nigeria, before you graduate 12th grade, you actually have to choose a major. So you in 10th grade, you choose your major. So
Mhm.
that's how your 10th, 11th, and 12th grade ends up, being addressed, is based on whatever you want. So when I was in 10th grade, mine was medicine. So that meant I had to take more chemistry, biology, and physics courses every single year. So that's kind of how they do it in Nigeria. Now, for my parents, you know, all along, I've always loved teaching. That was always there. But the issue was, you're not going to come from Nigeria and say you want to become a teacher. That couldn't be, I mean, it's so expensive to move and all that. So medicine made sense. And I love, people, encouraging people and so on. But what made more sense was going the PhD route. And at least I'll still have the word doctor in front of my name, I guess. But it was better to go that route, and then Christian apologetics. The PhD was solely going to be for Christian apologetics. Now, I will say this. I actually applied to Baylor University back in 2010, 11. I was going to, when I pivoted out of medicine on April 1st, 2009, I decided to go with Baylor, or to do my PhD in biochemistry, or something that would allow me to sort of be a Christian in the science community, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, but right around that time, I gave a talk again at a school. So I was back to doing talks when I could, and I did one at a school. And the principal said, "We're looking for a math instructor." And I still remember to this day, I just said, "Nope, not me. I'm not doing that, because my friends are going to med school. They're getting their PhDs. Like, I'm not going to tell my friends I'm staying behind to be a math teacher." Which again is bad. We shouldn't care about what people think at this level. But I was maturing and I had issues, I guess, back then. And then when I went to Baylor for just a visit, I realized, wait a second, while I'm young, why don't I use my youthful years to inspire young people? And then when I get older, I'll get my PhD. And so I took the job teaching math. I came back and I taught math. And honestly, that was one of the best decisions of my life. It gave birth to the Tools for Mastery Math book I talked about. It gave birth to my whole curriculum framework. It gave birth to the opportunity to literally transform American math education. Theoretically, we've done that, right? I've done all the work. Now it's how to implement. But I have taken all the textbooks, all the curriculum I could find, and I've broken it down into a very logical flow that can allow kids to excel in math. So that was what happened with the pivoting, into education. My parents were okay with it. They've been supportive all the way. I don't need a PhD to do my medical physics. Let me clarify that. But it's just one of those things where I do want to make an impact in higher ed, and I do want to raise the next generation of scientists, engineers, and mathematicians who also know the history and philosophy of science. And so that's kind of why the PhD is interesting to me.
Okay, so and so then you get to America, you marry Stephanie in 2011. Is
Yep.
that correct?
Yep. She
So
came to
this
my
is
college.
okay, so you met her in college.
Yep.
Okay, so you meet her in college, you get married, and then you said that this philosophy of science class basically changed the course of your life.
Yep.
And is it because of the interaction with the atheists that day? Like, what was it about that made you think, okay, this is the direction I need to go in? Because again, apologetics is not necessarily, uh, well, it seems like that's a part of some of the things that you're doing. So, how would
Yep.
that lead to all the education stuff? How are those related?
So right from about elementary school, third grade, I used to write math problems, like practice problems, for fun. So I always was this guy that was involved with math, and then also president of the science club. And so I was always involved in that kind of stuff, right? I loved informing and educating people the best I could. When I took the philosophy of science, it was also during a time I had discovered, people at the Discovery Institute, and there's some of the different groups that do work in science and faith. And Dr. John Lennox, who I've
Okay.
met a few times now, by God's grace, I love his work. And so what happened was, the class started with a book called "What is This Thing Called Science?" And I highly recommend that every scientist read that, because what happened is the philosophy of science did an a dissection of what is this science thing we talk about? Like the philosophy of science gave us a chance to step aside and examine science and look at it, right? Scientists sometimes buy into scienticism, the idea that science can explain everything, and it can't. We know that. John Lennox's book, Can Science Explain Everything, is a great resource on that. But I think that when I took that class, it was humbling because I was a chemistry major in a philosophy class, which is not very common. Many chemistry majors were busy doing chemistry. Amos wanted to also understand philosophy. So during those months, the papers that I was writing, the professor actually realized that, Amos, you might want to consider going to philosophy PhD because it seems like you do well with philosophy stuff. And prior to that, I'd always loved logic and reasoning and debating as a high schooler before I came to college. So anyway, so all of that is in my background. So I take the class and literally, I just feel like I'm getting this infusion of life in terms of being able to stand for why I believe in creation. So in the class, we read 4 books. The first one was, What is this thing called science? You could clearly see that the class left a mark on my heart, right? So what is this thing called science? We read Philip Johnson's book called Darwin on Trial. We read a book called Living with Darwin by Philip Kitcher, which is a book on the view that evolution is basically the way. So we had a book that talked about what is this thing called science. We had a book about evolution. We had a book about intelligent design, and then we had a book about creation. So sort of a spread around those topics. And the course was trying to make a case for because there's a whole book on evolution by Ed Larson, I believe. And that book talks about the history of evolution and evolutionary theory. And so at this point in the class, from January to May, I got a good recap of what is science, what is creation, the views and all of that. And so I was writing papers about these views. And I just feel like my life was really I was so excited. And that's where I knew I need to be in education. I need to be in the science space as a Christian apologist. And I want to lift high the name of Jesus in science. Like my friend James Clerk Maxwell, I say, I want to do that kind of work. And so that was what the philosophy of science class did for me, is it confirmed my love for science, philosophy, logic, all in one place.
Okay. Well, so, I mean, this idea, so a lot of what I'm wanting to do with the podcast is help people see that you can integrate science with your faith, that these are not separate things that can't ever mix at all, but that this, and again, I also want to be clear that it is the faith that's the foundation and that the science is integrated into that. It's not that the science, because you talked about scientism, this idea that science is everything, that the only way we learn things is through science. Well, that's like a religion, basically, where science is the center. And then maybe you can sprinkle some faith on top of that. Well, that's not what we are talking about. So for you, science is important, but understanding that faith is first and you integrate the science with that. So this class, there was a book on creation in the philosophy class?
Yes, or at least it was discussed with Philip Johnson's book, Darwin on Trial. I think that he would use that to maybe share some of the views that creationists would have.
Okay, and so would you say that the professor, would the professor stand? Was he just being completely neutral about all of this, or would he consider himself a Christian or a believer? Like, what is?
At the time, no, I don't. I haven't talked with him in a few years. I am going to reach out after this. I mean, we became good friends. He's retired now, but so I started. We had our conversation at the student center, and then I ended up, meeting with him. So we took the class, and then just afterwards we kept meeting. And so I loved the work that he was doing in terms of willing to listen to another side and have discussions. But he was not a Christian, and at the time, and he also, I would say, he was on the evolution side. One time I remember we're in class and they were talking about horse evolution or something, and they basically brought up the topic of, somehow it came up in the class discussion where it was like, hey, we have Amos now. We've got Amos. Like, they were basically saying that they've got me now to realize that, Amos, maybe you're wrong on your views and evolution might be true. Let's look at this chart of horses, something to that effect. So in that class, it was almost like every day was an opportunity for Christian apologetics, every single day. And so I honestly probably did more on the philosophy side than I did on chemistry side, just being honest. I think I was doing way more philosophy than I was doing chemistry. But I still finished my chemistry degree, but I was reading a lot of philosophy. What I want to come back to though is, so in the class, that was the direction, was evolution is sort of the way. And that's why we ended our class with the book called Living with Darwin. Like, basically, that's it. Like, this is it, guys. We've gone through this semester, and now we're going to end with a book that says, this is how it's going to be. It's just what it is. Evolution is the way. And of course, I made my case for why that's not the case. He actually encouraged me because I took more of his classes and I got a minor in philosophy. I ended up, he encouraged me to send my paper on the existence of God to the Wisconsin Philosophy Association. So that is a paper that is summarized at the back of one of my books called Christianity 201, but I have it free on my website. So I have a paper called Does God Exist? And I wrote that for philosophy class. And that talks about the teleological argument and the cosmological argument.
Okay. Yeah. So for people who are not familiar with those terms, tell people the difference between cosmological and teleological. What do those things mean, and what are
Yes.
the arguments for the existence of God?
Correct. Yep. So the way I would put it, and I gave a talk at the Midwest Creation Fellowship in Chicago about some of this as well. But the way I would put it is, we look at our world and we know that we're here, right? We know we're here. But the question then becomes, how did we get here? And what are the rules and the laws that govern us being here? We know that there was a beginning, right? That's, scientists will agree on that. They haven't always agreed on that, but at least we can agree.
Right.
Let's forgive them. 4,000 years later, they agree. That's fine. But we knew that from the beginning. But so if there was a beginning, then what made the beginning begin? And so the Kalam cosmological argument says whatever begins to exist needs a cause. The universe began to exist, so the universe needs a cause for its existence. So the first sort of requirement for how we can explain why we're here is we need someone to explain the origin of time, space, and matter. We need a beginning. That's number one. But it's not just that the universe began, it also has these properties that show design, which is where the teleological argument comes in. So we see design in the universe. So how do we explain design in the universe? And so basically, the way I put it is that if you needed to find who made this world the way it is and how we are here today, if you needed a resume, you need to ask, number one, that person or being needs to be eternal, live outside of time, and also have the ability to create and design the universe like it is. And the Christian, the God of the Bible, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He meets every requirement, quote unquote, for why we're here and how the universe works. So it's interesting because the more I've studied the topic of atheism and just that whole field of philosophy, the more I realize that the existence of God, like it takes a lot more work. It takes a lot more faith not to believe in God than it does to believe in God. Because, and I'll just say this if it's okay, about the teleological argument. I want to give an example. The laws of physics need to be true in order for us to be here. The laws of chemistry need to be true. Now, chemistry and physics are way more related. We've just been detaching them over time, but they're really, really good siblings. It's biology that is kind of off on the side. But so biology, the laws of biology need to be true in order for us to be here. So if the laws of chemistry, physics, biology all have to be true, then and they're not always necessarily like they're not always connected. For example, DNA and how DNA works might not be connected to gravity and how the gravitational theory. They're different, but they all have to be true, or they all have to work a certain way. What the teleological argument is saying is, what is the probability of all these things working out the way they're working without someone like a mind, without a designer? And I would say that probability is zero. There's just no way you can get all these laws all working, the fine-tuning of the universe, all of these things working well, and yet there's no mind behind the universe. I believe that God's hand is seen everywhere, like it says in Romans chapter 1. So when I do science, I see it from that perspective, that God made the world, therefore we can do science.
Yeah. So that's really good. That's a really good summary of cosmological and teleological, because those are the two of the major arguments. So I'm writing a book where it's basically it's appealing to the teleological argument. So my work was with robots, where I designed robots to walk on two legs, but the evolutionists say that, well, humans were previously these four-legged apes that somehow transformed over time into two-legged humans. Well, I've been studying two-legged walking for over a decade, and that stuff doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen through random processes. So I'm arguing in the book that no, that's not that doesn't, and again, if we look at the fossil record, there are a lot of things we can look at that make it clear that that's not the way it is. So I'm curious, you're in this class, the people say, okay, Amos, what about horse evolution? What was it about horse evolution that they thought was so compelling? I don't even, I'm not sure what they were even getting at.
Yeah, so that has been a while with the horse evolution. I have to go back and look at it, but I can tell you one of the main sort of sticking points in the theory of evolution they brought up and how I was able to sort of engage with it. But it was the topic of transitionary forms, and I think that's somewhere where it's connected. And it's
Yeah.
this idea that you have A and you have C, and or let's just say A, B, and C are three sort of structures you find in the fossil records and so on. A is one organism. C is one organism, and then B kind of looks like the in-between. And so then you say that's a transitionary form. Well, here's the problem, especially in philosophy. Here's the problem that and worldview and presuppositions and so on. The problem here is that they had a presupposition that B had to be a transitionary form in order to justify their theory. As a Christian, and when I look at certain species, I can also say that they were made after their kind. And so A is its own kind, B is its own kind, and C is its own kind. So both of us can actually try to make a case based on the same A, B, and C. So what I try to explain and tell people in this particular realm of discussion is there are certain points that, again, I don't want to use points to support creation that are sort of that somebody else can use to try and support evolution. So I would say at least we can just call that one a draw and push it aside and agree that our presupposition is dictating our views on the evidence that we find. So what I'm saying is when I go out in the field and I find species B, I'm going to look at it and say, wow, look what God created, or look how this came to be. The evolutionist is going to look at it and say, look at B. Wow, it's a transition. It looks like a bird and it looks like a reptile. This thing is the transition. Is it though? Right. And if you say, well, this is my evidence to prove evolution, it's like, no, that's not strong enough. You can't use that evidence, which I can also use, or I can also justify from a different angle. And this is where biology gets a little tricky with its historical science. And that's where I'm just like, I have friends who are biologists. One of my college instructors that mentored me was a biologist. But some days I'm just like, biologists, please, can we face the facts? Can we face the reality? And let's not say that we're doing science and then move into philosophy gently and then say, no, this is science. No, you change lanes here. You need to stay the lane. And then here's the sad thing I would say, and then sorry, I went long on that.
No,
there was a debate, which maybe we should do a reaction someday. Richard Dawkins and Neil deGrasse Tyson had a discussion recently.
Okay.
And this is, you have an astrophysicist and you have an evolutionary biologist who are both basically they're connected by atheism or non-belief in God, and they're talking about there's no design in the universe, it's all apparent design and stuff like that. But when I listen to biologists who go into the philosophy lane but don't have philosophical training, that's where we have a problem. And actually in Alabama, Dr. John Lennox and Richard Dawkins had a debate years ago, the God delusion debate, and you could see from their debate that John Lennox, who was trained in philosophy, was able to make his case well. Richard Dawkins was not trained in philosophy. That's why I plead with every scientist watching this or any young up-and-coming scientist, please take philosophy, please, so that we can have a framework for discussion. So.
Right. No, that's good because, the biologists, the biology professors, it's really tough for me because I'll read these books that talk about how these biology professors will talk about how poorly designed the human body is. Now, my work is in engineering design. Your work is in biology. You're not in your lane. You're talking about something that you don't know about. So when these people say, well, the eye is backward or the ACL, why would anybody, I read something that they said, why would any mechanical engineer design a knee like that? I'm a mechanical engineer. Like it's a really great structure that God made. And you can't do anything better. So then what are you talking about? Right. So it's hard not to get angry or get irritated because these biology professors will step outside and get into areas of philosophy or engineering design for which they have no training. And they're saying things that just are not true. So that's one of my pet peeves or irritations I see a lot of. And so that is something you see. So yeah, you're I want to talk a little bit about the STEM Excellence Center. That I know
Yeah.
that's something that you okay. So right now you have the Life Center, which is Learning Institute for Excellence.
Yes.
And you're saying that you want to have a STEM center, STEM
Yep.
Excellence Center, and
Yep.
that would be this bigger effort or program, and it would be incorporating Bible into science. It would be incorporating science into a biblical worldview, and you'd be teaching students. I know that's something that you have a vision for. Can you tell us something? Tell us more about that. What is that?
Yep. So when I started the Learning Institute for Excellence in 2013, it was started in the summer. And growing up in Nigeria, we don't have 3 months off from school. That's part of why I say this with humility, but that's part of why we're better in math than America. You shouldn't
Oh yeah,
take.
that's fine. We're struggling right now, but yeah.
Yeah, I think America, the analogy when I think of America sometimes is like America has honestly given up on like math excellence. Like it's given up. We're not even trying. You could pretend to try. We're not even trying. And so when I look at countries that are number one, right, I could talk about the top 10 countries like Taiwan, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and China. When I look at them, right, there's a certain pattern to how they do their math lessons. Like if you want to be good at football or soccer, you go to France, you go to Germany, right? You go to places where they play well. If you want to understand freedom and liberty, you go to America. You don't go to North Korea. So if you want to understand math, you go to Singapore, India, Nigeria. That's just a few countries, right? Look at what they're doing. The fact that they're all doing calculus in high school. Everybody in Nigeria does calculus. Like the kids who are the worst students do calculus. And then the best students actually do advanced math 1 and advanced math 2. So I did about 9 courses in math from 10th to 12th grade. 9 courses in math. And when you look at what we're doing, and then you look at America, and America is still debating sometimes whether we should do calculus in 12th grade. I'm like, you guys are kidding. Like, you have constant electricity, you have running water, and you're debating whether you're going to give the highest level of math and science excellence. Like, anyways, my heart breaks for the mediocrity of American education. So when I was teaching, I was blessed with the opportunity to explore curriculums and stuff. And so what I did was, I started the Learning Institute of Excellence in the summer because there was no limit to what could be taught and the enrichment that could be given, right? So I wanted kids to come and then learn, figure out their careers, life direction and stuff like that. But most kids don't come out in the summer. It seems like they don't want to come and do school in the summer, but I still have done that and still do programs in the summer. So that program started in 2013. Then it became a tutoring sort of program, and then it became a tutoring center, and I did that in different cities, homework help, ACT prep, SAT prep, and I still plan to do those at the STEM Excellence Center. But for the past 12 years, my curriculum work has mostly been in math alone. Even though my degrees are in chemistry and medical physics, I just have this passion for math excellence. I've been teaching math from 2007. And I found the beauty in math. And that's probably, I have the book somewhere here. That's probably the work of people like Leonard Euler, Euler's identity. Some of these things are just beautiful. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't go into science initially, and finally have decided to do that. And the reason is when you go into science, you have to bring in worldview right away. Like when you do math, you could just do math. You could do math centers. But when you bring in science, especially physics, my first question is, why do the laws work? And how does any of this make sense, right? Eugene Wigner, I think, wrote a book about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics, right? These physicists are looking at math and saying, this doesn't make sense that it makes so much sense. And the answer is because God made the world. Right. So if I'm going to do STEM, which is the big thing now, again, I've taught in the STEM fields, I've done work in it, I've just never done it sort of formally at the tutoring center scale that we're going for. I need to be clear with people that I believe that God made the heavens and the earth. Now, some people today are so sort of brainwashed in science to think that, faith is over here, science is over here, don't bring them together. Well, I want to give a quick example. C.S. Lewis has great writing on this, the abolition of man with the problem of education. But let me give 2 quick examples. I've already talked about John Lennox. This was one of his professors. Belief in God in an Age of Science, John Polkinghorne. Now, John Polkinghorne and John Lennox did not agree on everything, right? I watched your video about theistic evolution, and that's a very interesting topic. But I would say John Pokinon still has a lot of good stuff to teach us about faith and science. Now, he passed away a few years ago, but Pokinon was a high-level theoretical physicist, at the highest level you can get. Some of his people got Nobel Prizes. I mean, this guy was good, but he's making it clear that belief in God does not have to be removed from the discussion. And now I'll end with my best friend and tie it to the STEM Excellence Center, and that's Maxwell and Faraday. And so James Clerk Maxwell, probably arguably the best mathematical physicist of the 1800s. His work gave rise to light as electromagnetic radiation. He showed us the contents of the rings of Saturn. He inspired work that Einstein said, Einstein even said, I stand at the shoulders of Maxwell. When you come to a STEM Excellence Center, the idea is, I want you to become like Maxwell, an Euler. I want you to be the best in your craft. Like your school can teach you the different topics you're learning at school, but when you come to our center, we're going to teach you the historical background of the concepts you're learning so you can become a world-class scientist. But we also need to include the fact that there are philosophy of science discussions, there are logical and theological implications of some of the theories that we believe, and so we are open. I am open to having those conversations with people. I really want scientists today to go back and learn from scientists in the 17 and 1800s. Two quotes on this. One is Leonard Euler's student said of him that he was so serious about his faith. It was something he wouldn't play around with. But who is Euler? People are like, I don't know Euler. Well, look up the top 5 mathematicians of all time. Euler, Newton, Gauss, all the time you see those names. Yeah. And so I was thinking about it, of the top 5 mathematical physicists or top people in that space, 4 out of 5 of them were professing believers in some sort. So Newton, Euler, Gauss, and Maxwell, right? Those will be the some of the top. And so I look at that and I'm like, why is it today that people seem to remove this? They detach it. I don't know if it's just the issue of political correctness or fear, but what if we just allow for some dialogue and allow people to explore how those scientists explored? And then the last quote that probably should be on our wall at the STEM Excellence Center is James Clerk Maxwell said, I want to serve God in my generation like David served God in his. I want to serve God in my generation like David served God in his. And today we talk of Maxwell's equations and so on and so forth. I really think young people should be given the opportunity to learn science and math at the highest level, while also being encouraged to explore the discussions around the philosophy of science and the history of science.
Okay. Yeah. So you said earlier that if you want to know how to teach math, you need to go to these certain places. Yep. Would you say that and you've been drawing from that as you've developed your mathematics curricula, I think. Yep. And so is that also true for science, technology, engineering as well? Are there certain places that are doing that well that you are learning from as you build this broader base of not just math, but also science as well? Where else are you learning from? Or are you saying, I'm learning from James Clerk Maxwell? That's my person I'm learning from.
Yeah. So I am learning from some of the direct sources, from Maxwell, from Newton, and so on and so forth. Those countries that I mentioned earlier, a lot of them would also be our examples to follow. And please know that with the math side, again, I've taken the K-12 math, I've condensed it into one curriculum without duplication. The idea is that American math has too much duplication. So let's condense it into one space, and then let's teach from the most basic topics to the most advanced topic. That list of topics from basic to advanced exists in my book, in a couple of my books, but basically I have it in the third part of my book. Every single topic is listed. And then if you click on it, quote unquote, I actually go into a subcategorization of every topic. So we have every single topic that kids need to learn. And we basically can take you from 1 + 1 to calculus in less than 3 years. So that's what I've done, is that I'm taking all that waste out. Those countries, some of them actually are not as efficient. They do repeat some stuff, but they do well. If you're good at math, it generally translates into science, physics, and chemistry especially. So Singapore is very good. Nigeria is very good. In the K-12 space, America struggles. In the university space, we actually do pretty good. We allow for creativity and innovation and so on. Let me give you an example of science class. Let me just give you an example of a Nigerian student compared to an American student. And I wanted to show you that American students are actually at a huge disadvantage. And let me explain. When I was in 10th grade and had to choose a track, I chose medicine or engineering. So in 10th grade, here was my coursework. I had, of course, English and biology. Everybody took biology for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. But let's look at my other courses. I had regular math with everybody. I had advanced math 1, pure mathematics, advanced math 2, applied mathematics. I had chemistry 1, chemistry 2, and chemistry 3, three different branches of chemistry. I had physics, heat, and physics mechanics. I had biology, and I had agricultural science. I was doing 10 science courses in 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. When I came here in my chemistry major, it was graded on a curve. It was all right. It was fine because I came with that background. Mm-hmm. Then you have an American high school student who does like algebra 2 and maybe some pre-calc and sometimes doesn't do calc or maybe calc 1 at the most. And then they do 1 chemistry, 1 physics, and 1 biology.
Right.
How do those students compete with a student that comes with some of our backgrounds from India, Singapore, and Nigeria? We see the 50% dropout in engineering programs in America. There's a reason for that. And it's actually one of the main reasons is because they say there's not enough preparation in the K-12 space. And that makes a lot of sense. So I would say that Nigeria has a rigor that America should try to adopt, especially if you have a kid who knows they love building, they know they're going into engineering. In America, you can pivot. You can become an engineer who becomes a doctor later on, but you need to have a direction going somewhere first. And that's what I would encourage American families to do.
Okay, so let's say there are going to be American families listening to this. So if you're a parent, what do you need to do? I guess you're saying they would need to be, the current system is not going to do this, so they need to supplement somehow with tutors or programs. Like what would somebody do to remedy this for their kids?
So I would say that we need to give up the myth that you choose your college major in college. We really need to help people, and this is actually a resource I talk about a lot, career planning for teens. It could be a different book, but we really need to start having those conversations in middle school. Because, and the reality is that STEM is really where there's a lot of opportunity anyways right now. So people could go into other fields, I get it. But I'm just saying there's a lot of opportunity and some kids have the aptitude, the math skills. So why don't you begin to help them look at, and I have some other resources here on like engineering and medicine and, different fields. I also love economics. So even that field as well. But the idea is give your child job shadowing opportunities, have them watch documentaries, have them meet people, let them be thinking about it. So number one is parents need to encourage their children to start thinking about career prep early. Because if you know you want to be an engineer, for example, then you should supplement your education. You should look at something like a STEM Excellence Center or some of our resources. My curriculum framework is counted to calculus. And basically, I bring college math courses into the high school space. That's part of what I do, is I bring that. And that's part of my work with Latrono University. In they have a dual enrollment program. And I'm bringing that program to families saying, here, your kid wants to be an engineer. I can get them 21 math credits. College credits before they even graduate high school. I can get them university physics. Let's get all that stuff so that when they go into college, they're starting from Calc 3, they're starting from linear algebra, they're moving on. They're not starting college and going, okay, where are my math skills at? And so part of what I've done is I'm making the straightest path and most efficient path from basic math to calculus for the general public. And then for those who want to be engineers, I give them the double dose. So that's what I do, is I meet every family's where they're at and try to help them max out on their math abilities, because math is beautiful. That's part of it. God made the world. Math is here to help us understand the world. Let's help people max out on their abilities.
Right. And then the Excellence Center are you pairing tutors with students? What does that look like? If a student comes to you or a family comes to you and they say, for this program that you're going to have,
yep.
What is that going to look like? You're wanting to have one-on-one tutoring? Is it classes? Yep. What's happening after school for this?
Yeah, and so we are still, of course, praying and working through the details. I'm working with some business, management consultants and so on. And I know that your experience will definitely be helpful. Some point I'm going to pick your brain for the more of the hands-on engineering side. But the idea is, instead of having a center for computer science and coding over here, having a math center over here, having a science tutoring over there, we're bringing it all into one place, right? Because when you look at fields of study like physical chemistry or physics, you're doing math, you're doing computer science, you're doing chemistry, you're doing it all together anyway. So that integrative approach is what I really want to build on. And so when you come to this STEM Excellence Center, if you have any homework, we'll get it done. That'll be out of the way. the homework is the least of our worries. We want to then turn our attention to your life and your direction and goals for mastery, mathematics, and science. So we're enriching your learning experience. So you come for like an hour, you get your homework done. There's going to be, the vision I have for this is, imagine you have a few round tables, maybe even have like a hot chocolate bar, smoothie. I'm trying to remove any intimidation of like math, but the thing is, I'm providing the math level that Maxwell and Euler and Newton, like the way they learned, that's how I'm teaching. And that's a mastery-based approach where you're building on, a solid foundation. So basically you come to the center, maybe you're scheduled from 4 to 5, you get the homework done. There's tutors that are trained. So I do tutor training. I train, and then I'm just like, basically think of me like a medical doctor working with physician assistants and nurses to take care of every student that comes. But I'm making the big goals for, working with the students to have their big goals. And then I assign a tutor to help them with specific assignments and tasks. And then I gather people together and we say, hey guys, today we're going to talk about the 1800s. We're going to talk about the scientific discoveries of Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell. So every week they're learning the history and philosophy of science on top of their regular schoolwork. There's not a lot of homework for that, but it's just an opportunity to open their eyes to the context that gave rise to the science and math principles they're learning.
Okay. All right. So that's and you're wanting to do this, maybe again, you just had the 7th baby. So like when do you look for this to be materialized? The next 5-10 years? Shorter than that? Like, what are you thinking?
The fall of 2025, God willing. That would be my goal. So the last baby is actually 1 now, so there's some cushion. So he's 1, and so and then my son, who's in 6th grade, is doing algebra right now, and so he's actually sort of part of that cohort. He wants to be a mechanical engineer and a pilot. So
yeah. Okay, so you've got a son that's 11 years old. He's in the 6th grade, down to a 1-year-old. Are you homeschooling? Are you doing? Are you using the public school system, or are they in private school? What are you doing for your own children to educate them?
We're homeschooling. So one of the schools I actually started a hybrid homeschool model that, basically my dream with that was initially to make that into, sort of a model that other people can copy and paste. And so we started that in Moorhead, Minnesota. And the hybrid model is you come 2 days a week, Mondays and Thursdays, and then the rest of the week you're doing your work at home. So my kids have taken part in that model, and that is right now they're just doing homeschooling, but the goal would be to have something like that again, a hybrid model where they come 2 days a week, work with some kids on projects, and then work from home the rest of the week.
Okay, and so a homeschool day, because again we have all of these, I guess the word would be archaic things that we do, right? Like the 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 workday. That came from like the Industrial Revolution, because it was dark at 5 or something. Like we do all of these things that we don't really realize why we're doing them. And so are you doing basically like 3 or 4 hours? Is it an extended time in terms of what the kids are doing at home? Or do you have any sense of what's ideal or optimal when it comes to kids? Do kids need to be in there 12 hours, or is it better for 4, or is whatever the current, I actually don't know what the current system is. I guess it'd be like 7 or 8 o'clock, or maybe 9 o'clock till 2 or something. What do you have some thoughts about that, like as far as the time during each day?
So I'll quickly mention that some of my math curriculum work has actually been used especially by homeschoolers. So I've done a lot of math curriculum writing. There is a science curriculum that already buys into the vision of the history being taught by Berean builders and Dr. J. Wiles, which is a great curriculum. So that's what I recommend, as far as science. But so as far as our kids, one of the best formulas for homeschooling that has been recommended is this idea of maybe an hour for every core subject. So like an hour of English, an hour of math, an hour of science, and an hour of social science. And the idea is that you're basically taking the hour, maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and you're just covering as much as you can within that time frame. Once you're done, once you get to a good stopping point, you call it a good, hey, I'm good now. Some days, you might read the lesson and realize you're done in a half hour. And the recommendation from people like Andrew Pudua and some other people in the homeschool community, is that you should try to still force it into the hour just to build a discipline. There's so many styles for homeschooling, and homeschoolers can be very particular about their approach. I get it. But I will recommend that about an hour, especially for math, I'm going to say that, at least an hour. And then even while listening to classical music, if you want to do that while doing your math, and then call it a day and then move on from there. So about 4 to 5 hours is more than enough time to get the work done. But our family does a year-round schooling model also. And so we take breaks from time to time, but we are able to still get stuff done. The American education system is actually, the K-12 is very inefficient. And so people need to just realize that and integrate more of what I said earlier about like career planning, job shadowing, hands-on experience. Like people should be doing more of that and not be wasting, the time the children have, which is what I noticed in our education system.
Yeah. Because I mean, they have these bells where it's like you ring the bell after 47 minutes or something like that. And that comes from the, preparing people to go out and work in a factory, and we still do it. And I just don't know how. Well, I think things like what you're talking about would be a step in the right direction away from that kind of thing. So,
yes, sir.
Okay. So we're getting close to an hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. There are 4 kind of questions towards the end, kind of lightning round. It doesn't have to be lightning round, but like it would just be interested in hearing your thoughts. The first question is, what book are you just told us about a bunch of books, so that's good. But is there one particular book that you are recommending to people in general when you're meeting somebody? It's like, hey, I just read this thing. You need to check this book out.
So one of the books that I would highly recommend is Life Together by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I know we've been talking a lot about apologetics, but the reason why I bring him up is, of course, the church is the body of Christ, and there's a way that the church should operate. We should bear one another's burdens. We should love one another. And I think America, because of the wealth, quote unquote, that we have, sometimes there's this individualistic attitude we have, and there's this attitude of not bearing one another's burdens or encouraging. Like we don't always see this community that we see in the book of Acts in terms of checking up on one another, making time to be intentional in investing in the lives of one another. So when we look at Bonhoeffer's story and the Nazi Germany in the 1940s, we realize that we need to cherish one another more. So that's a book that I'm going to be dissecting over the next couple of weeks. And just that whole topic is one of my passions. The body of Christ functioning as it should. That's number one. I talked about Letourneau University earlier, but there's actually a book called Mover of Men and Mountains by R.G. Letourneau. And so he was actually, he built a lot of the big machines that were used to build the runways in World War II, a lot of mining. I mean, so he has big machines in oil, oil drilling and all of that. And so he has a lot of stuff in mechanical engineering. You'll find him interesting. But he actually had like a middle school education, and he was just very, very good at, thinking like an engineer. So those are 2 books I would recommend right off the bat. I don't know if I was allowed to have more than one.
No, that's fine.
But then in the apologetic space, I would encourage The Return of the God Hypothesis by Dr. Stephen Meyer as a resource. I honestly think we need to do some book studies on that. And by God's grace, I've also met Stephen Meyer a few times, and I'm meeting with him again in a couple of months.
Okay, so can you you met John Lennox and you've met Stephen Meyer. How is that happening?
And it's for John Lennox. I went to a conference in Alabama, and that was where I met him. So I met him back in 2010, and then in 2020, crazy story. I just got to say this because this will teach somebody a life lesson. In 2020, I was flying through England to Nigeria, and I reached out to John Lennox's secretary because I had emailed with him before just about thanks for your work. I really love what I'm learning, and I just wanted to say thank you. And of course, they were like, thanks for your message. Have a great day. But then later on, 10 years later or so, I sent an email and I said, hey, remember I emailed you 10 years ago? I'm stopping in England and I have a 10-hour layover. Is there any chance that I could say hi to Dr. Lennox? I mean, this was just like, let me just try. And the secretary said, which by the way, his secretary has a PhD, but his secretary said, well, he's out of the office that day. For those who don't know, Dr. John Lennox is a mathematician from Oxford University. He's now a professor emeritus. He has a PhD, a DSc, and a DPhil, so equivalent of 3 PhDs. And Dr. Lennox at that time was not going to be in the office. But when I landed in England, I said to myself, I'm going to go to Oxford. If I see him, great. If I don't see him, at least I tried. And I could see Oxford. So I got on the bus. And while I was on the bus on the way to Oxford, his secretary emailed and said, Amos, Dr. Lennox just ran into the office. If you can be here in an hour, he will wait for you. Would you believe that? So my quote is, get on the bus, because you just never know. I got on the bus, and because I was on that bus, I met him. If I wasn't on that bus, I wouldn't have met him. So we sat down, we talked about, he heard about some of my work in math writing. He encouraged me to keep doing the work I'm doing. And then I bought his book, and Science Explained Everything. Well, I had a copy. He signed for me. He prayed with me. It was just a wonderful time together, just getting to know him. He is probably the closest Christian apologist model, because I love his gentleness. I love he has all the knowledge, the vast knowledge. And I just love his science and philosophy background. Now, there's one more person I didn't mention, James Torr, who I also had an opportunity to meet, and that's out of Rice University. So he is more on the rigor of scientific, experiments and so on in organic chemistry. What I do is I've emailed them, shared about work I do, and I tried to see if I could please meet. I met Dr. Meyer just through different activities with Discovery Institute. That was part of how we met. So that's how I met them, and I feel like they're getting older, so we really need to raise the next generation of up and coming scientists and mathematicians that take the baton.
I don't know who usually Stephen Meyer is one of the younger guys out of those people, I would say. I don't know about maybe Dr. Torr, I'm not sure, but Lennox is pretty old now, and so so that's interesting. Okay, well, I just need to do that then. I just need to be trying to go to Oxford and show up. Get on the bus. That's the quote, right? Get on the bus.
Get on the bus. And if you are ever in Texas, and you go to Houston, it would be fun to try and schedule a podcast and see if any of our friends would be open to maybe doing a podcast episode. So
and go to Houston. So that's Tyler is closest to Houston. Is that right?
Tyler is about 3.5 hours from Houston.
Okay, so Houston is the closest big city in Texas, I guess.
Dallas is 2 hours from me, and then Houston is 3.5.
Okay, so but some of these people are in Houston, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Well, next question. What's an interesting quote or scripture you've been considering recently?
So the quote right now, nothing comes to mind for a specific quote. Well, actually, this is going to sound odd because we're talking apologetics and so on, but I'm just going to bring in a business guy for a second. There's a guy named Jensen Huang, NVIDIA, the CEO of NVIDIA.
Right.
And I have been encouraged by some of his lectures or talks, commencement speeches. I mean, he's an engineer, but to me, he sounded like a motivational speaker, right? And at some point, I'm gonna, when we meet or whatever, I can share more about just some of the challenges I faced in trying to run a school while being an academic. I really needed a business specialist. That's what I've learned, is that my skills are not in the business side; they're more in the academics and the rigor of STEM. And I need somebody who just understands business, that can price things right and all of that, right? So I've been spending some time in that space, learning from people who are good at business. Because these STEM Excellence Centers, they're going to mostly be run by business management, people who also see the mission beyond just money, if that makes sense. They see that it's about, young people, it's about faith, it's about life. And so anyways, I'm just saying that to say I've kind of learned my lesson for collaboration. Don't try to do everything is what I would encourage an up and coming entrepreneur. But Jensen Huang also had challenges business-wise back in the 1990s. And in some cases, he would say that there were some things that were not working. And listening to his story of setbacks, it's been very interesting. And one of the things he said at the commencement speech at Caltech was basically, when you face setbacks or failure comes in any of your sort of business or whatever, he says you need to learn and move on swiftly. Like, that is something I struggle with. I want to sit down as a philosopher. My philosophy mind kicks in and I start thinking about what can I do better here, here, and here? Because I want to help everybody. I want to help every child be good at math. But there's so many people that, I've tried to help that maybe can't afford the help, and I'm not a billionaire, right? So I can't just keep doing that. And so that's a big life lesson I've learned. And Jensen Huang, and the timing of when I've heard some of his talks, has really been encouraging. He seems to be, good guy. Anyways, and this is part of why electrical engineering is very, electrical engineering is pulling at me, and I could share on that if you want at some point. But
Yeah.
electrical engineering, and just seeing some of the work he's doing and his ability to think outside the box. So, anyways, on the quote side, when we face challenges in life, and when things don't work out as we're hoping, we need to learn to move on swiftly and learn from our experiences and move on. So that's that quote. As far as scripture, I'm in the book of Ephesians right now, and I've read it many times. I try to read through the epistles regularly. The epistles are very direct in how they teach us to live. Here's how you should live. Run away from this. Run to this. And in Ephesians, Paul is actually teaching us how to pray. It seems like there's a lot of passages about prayer in Ephesians. And so anyways, I've been encouraged. And one of the verses talks about, it says, in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, according to the riches of his grace, which he made to abound toward us in all wisdom and prudence. Wisdom and prudence. Those are two things now. I'm right around, 36 right now. And I'm in this interesting halfway point, right, in life. Yeah. Of your 70 years of, say 70 years, we get 80 years, in Psalms, it says. Of course, people live longer than that. But those are like our prime years of work sometimes. For me, I don't really believe in the whole retirement idea. We should still rest. We should still, we should be of service to humanity in some capacity by God's grace till we leave this earth, right? Till he returns or calls us home. And so what I realize is that Ephesians is very powerful in reminding us of some things like this wisdom and prudence thing. And so that's one of the things that I think, for me, the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, we need to walk with prudence. We need to walk with wisdom. And that's some of what I've been thinking about lately.
Okay. Yeah, good. All right. I don't know what you're going to say about this. What is something you believe that most people don't?
Well, there's a few. I've already mentioned a few of them today.
Yeah,
one of them is that
a couple things today. Yeah.
Oh yeah, one of them is that everybody should do calculus. That's number one. Everybody, okay. No exceptions. People are like, why would you say that? What if I'm not good at math? Well, the reason why you're not good at math sometimes is because, unfortunately, you have bad math study skills, and you need to fix those. And you also need a curriculum that is consistent. Anyways, that's my last plug for Counter to Calculus. Okay. So that's number one. And it's not only because I've put together a curriculum. There's actually this book here. I didn't write it, called Understanding Mathematics from Counter to Calculus. And it shows us the structure. The author is also an electrical engineer. I feel like I'm surrounded by electrical engineers all the time these days. Yeah. But I bring this up to say, I believe in a higher standard of education. Now, I'm using math as an example, but let's go bigger. I think that we need to so I personally believe we need a higher bar in STEM, and we need to help every child have a vision for life while they're still in middle school, high school. I hear a lot of people saying things like, oh, they'll figure out their lives later. But here's the thing, though. If we believe in creation, why do we doubt that people can have a vision while they're still teenagers? I think that there's a connection between believing in creation, the fact that God has made everybody, like he has made us in his image, and he has put in us certain things. And even in Ephesians, it talks about, he's giving different gifts to people. So my unconventional belief in this sense is I really want to see every young person have a vision for life. And I feel like our culture doesn't care enough about it. They just think when you get to college, you'll figure it out. But college shouldn't be your whole life. College should be a part of your life. It should be a part of your journey. And as much as I'm a nerd, and I would get PhDs as many times over if I was young and in my 18, 19, 20 years, I would just keep getting PhDs, right? But I'm realizing that college needs to serve a purpose. It can't be the thing. We are making it the thing, and therefore too many kids are not living lives of purpose. Those are some beliefs I have that I really want more people to buy into. Raise the bar in science and math, and also give children a vision for life. Yeah. Now, I don't know if you had this question tied to like a faith belief, would you say, or no? Just
whatever you have in mind. Okay. We could go with.
Yep. So those are some of the things that I would say. Yeah. I'm a little an outside the box thinker when it comes to that. I do think also that we need to do more integrated. Now, I don't know if this is unconventional or if it's just that people haven't given enough time to think about it. But I really envision that the day where we can do more integrative learning of, as I said, chemistry, physics, math, engineering, and the history of it combined. Like, I would love that to happen It's not a very traditional, everybody says just take your one class at this time and so on. Amos is saying in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, you should be doing chemistry, physics, math, engineering together, especially for those who want to be engineers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. You got 7 kids. We didn't really get to talk about, because I'm a single guy, no kids yet. So we didn't really talk all that much about your family, but you got 7 kids. Let's say there's a piece of wisdom that you would want to leave behind for Malachi and the other kids. What would that one piece of wisdom be?
I actually started doing a video recording series. I haven't kept up with it, and I just got the Notion app going. So my life is going to be way more orderly now because of Notion. It's a great resource. They didn't pay me to say that, by the way. I just like Notion.
We need to get a sponsorship or something on here.
Yeah, but it's really helping me organize things well. And one of the things I want to do is, because I have nephews and nieces, and of course my kids are here, but my nephews and nieces are in England, Nigeria, Minnesota. I want to find ways to kind of encourage them with some thoughts, right? And so one of the thoughts for my kids and the young people is that, especially if you live in America or England, you're living in a culture that has so many distractions. You're living in a culture that has so much stuff. And the danger is that those things can steal your heart away from what matters. And so there are few essential things you always have to remember. Number one, if God exists, then he exists eternally. Therefore, even when hard times come, remember that he is there. We've talked about the fact of the existence of God. We've talked about the fact of the teleological argument and the cosmological argument, or the teleological argument is the design argument. And we've looked at the fact that God has left his evidence. We see it. We know he's there. But now what happens when life gets hard? What happens when things don't make sense? Remember that he's still there. And look more into, what is he teaching me? What is God doing in this situation? And remember that, because I hear so many people who leave Christianity sometimes saying, well, I was a Christian and then this happened. I lost my uncle. But here's the problem. If you were a Christian and you believe the universe came because of God's word and so on, well, now how did the universe come? If you're going to say now you don't believe in God, well, that doesn't solve the problem of how he came to be. And then if they say, well, I don't care, well, here's the problem. Your belief is irrelevant when it comes to the question of the existence of God. We need an explanation. And God is eternal. He's the one that made the world. So remember God even when suffering comes. And in the midst of abundance, do not forget God. So the passages that will encourage them, and now that we're talking, I'm going to have to print these out. Next time we talk, I should probably have this printed. Deuteronomy chapter 8. Deuteronomy chapter 8, when it talks about when you have eaten and are full, right? That's one of the passages. Remember verse 7. Do not forget how much, let's go down. He talks about in verse 13 and around the whole passage, basically, he says it multiple times. When you have eaten and are full, do not forget God. And that's part of the challenge I see in the Western countries. Now, in Nigeria, I never really met anyone who didn't believe in God. Everybody believed. Now, there was Christians, there was Muslims, and I get that. That discussion is another topic we can talk about. But they all believed something, right? In America, though, we have a lot of people who say, I don't believe anything. Well, our kids need to realize that, in the midst of abundance, there comes the danger of apathy. And Leonard Ravenhill has a great quote on this. He's quoting the cycles of civilizations, where you go from bondage, fear, and you get courage, and then you get basically freedom and liberty. But then it comes with abundance, and then apathy, selfishness, and then you get into a cycle. So I think that my children, hopefully, my prayer, which I'm going to remind them of more now, is Deuteronomy chapter 8 and Ecclesiastes 12:1. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. While you have strength, channel that strength to serving God, rather than what the culture says. Some of the bad rap music that is out there will tell the kids, live your life however you want when you're young. Do whatever you want while you're young. No, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. And so those are some of the pieces of advice. Understand the times you're living in and represent Christ in those stations you find yourself.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think there's a shift culturally. I mean, the world does say a lot of those things, but you're beginning to see more and more people who are atheistic that are beginning to say, there's nothing out here for me. Like it's barren. There's nothing there. And they're beginning to consider the truth now. and in a way that they didn't as much. I think there's a shift that's happening, and I think we can certainly take advantage of that. Okay, well, if someone wants to get in contact with you, how do they do that? What's the best way to contact Amos?
So Amos the Math Guy at gmail.com. Amos the Math Guy at gmail.com.
Okay.
My website, amosthemathguy.com, basically just has resources for families. And I have a lot of free math videos and tutorials that people can use. And so anything math or STEM, Amos loves to talk about that. And of course,
Yeah.
tie it into apologetics.
Okay. Well, anything else that any parting message you have for the people before we, because we need to
Yeah.
talk offline after this, but yeah, like anything else you have for the people on the podcast?
For the general people listening again, I really am excited for what you're doing, Dr. Jerry. I'm excited to see what the Lord will do with this. I really think we need more. We really do. And I talked to Dr. James Storr about this briefly. I've talked with other people. We need more Christians who are serving well in their chemistry, physics, math departments, doing their jobs well, but also seeking to be a light and connecting the dots. So let's encourage families to really look at STEM fields almost as a mission field, as an opportunity, and we can raise kids to do that. And then let's not go with whatever the culture says. Let's try to go against the current. As Malcolm
Right.
Muggeridge said, only dead fish swim with the current. So don't swim with the current. Try to go
Love that.
against the current. And be like a Daniel, be like an Esther in this day and age that you live in.
Yeah, that's very good. We don't want to be dead fish out here. We're ready
No.
to be going in a different direction.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Well, thanks for joining us on the Faith Science Podcast. Amos just told you how to contact him. Please subscribe to the channel or comment or do all of that podcasty stuff that I'm not good at giving the outro for. But till next time, keep asking questions and keep the faith.